telepathic dogs, eerily topical pandemics, mass infertility. When it comes to zombies, disease, or mass extinction, these films are the cream of the crop. Apocalyptic films are teeming with The Walking Dead, nuclear threats, and catastrophic plagues. But only one film on this list sees the world sizzle to a crisp thanks to dragons. Set in the totally not apocalyptic year of 2020, where dragons have replaced mankind as the dominant species, the paltry remnants of the human race must work together to ensure their survival. Maligned upon its release and criminally underseen, Reign of Fire is much more interesting, visually stunning, and sophisticated than its goofy premise suggests. With an all-star cast and some genuinely jaw-dropping creature effects, it's a must-watch for anyone who wants to see the world burn. This loose adaptation of Richard Matheson's classic novel follows scientist Robert Neville, who is, as far as he can tell, one of the last human beings on Earth. Thanks to an attempt to cure cancer that mutated into a deadly virus, most humans have become pallid, vampiric creatures. Balancing mind-numbing loneliness with his attempts to survive and develop a cure, Neville soon finds that he is far less alone than he initially suspected. Grounded by a heartfelt performance by Will Smith and featuring more action than the vast majority of films on this list, I Am Legend is a punchy, big-budget take on an apocalyptic urtext.
Please say hello to me.
This film tells of a uniquely terrifying plague which only attacks strains of grasses and grains, including wheat and rice. In the wake of this catastrophe, the world descends into famine and, consequently, chaos. We follow an upper-middle-class architect named John, who becomes the de facto patriarch of a group of family, friends, and stragglers as they make their way to the safe haven of his brother's farm. Pay no attention to the film's middling Rotten Tomatoes score. What no blade of grass lacks in polish and a finer touch, it more than makes up for in grim, stifling ecological terror. Enduringly relevant and dystopian, No Blade of Grass is an essential watch for anyone with a taste for the dreary, hopeless outlook of 1970s science fiction. Ralph Burton is a miner who's trapped underground while a nuclear holocaust wipes out all of humanity. Emerging to find New York City deserted, Ralph assumes he's the last man on Earth and starts acting like it. Eventually, Ralph meets Sarah, a fellow survivor. However, their dynamic is soon disturbed by the arrival of another survivor. Starring the trailblazing screen star and activist Harry Belafonte, The World, the Flesh, and the Devil feels like a lost Twilight Zone episode filtered through the lens of Richard Matheson, tackling its societal themes head-on and highlighting Belafonte's undeniable screen presence. This film is an unmissable and decidedly more optimistic entry in apocalyptic cinema. Sunshine dramatizes a horrific world-ending scenario. The sun is dying. As the planet is thrust into colder and colder temperatures, a team of crack astronauts are sent to kickstart the all-important star by firing a nuclear bomb into its core. Full of incredible visuals and shocking horror beats, particularly in the third act, Sunshine is an enthralling and atmospheric slice of science fiction with stakes that don't just threaten humanity, but our whole solar system. This sci-fi survival horror film and Cloverfield sequel follows Michelle, a young woman who wakes up in an underground bunker after a violent roadside accident. Unsettled by her domineering captor Howard, who claims the air outside is toxic and she cannot leave under any circumstances, resourceful Michelle sets about plotting her escape.
Please, just let me go, please.
There's nowhere to go, Michelle.
This economically paced and wildly tense single-location thriller boasts numerous top-shelf performances and a claustrophobic sense of unease. If the world ended and you were trapped underground with an overbearing psycho, what would you do? From its title, you'd be forgiven for mistaking this film for some kind of adorable seaside romantic comedy. It is, in fact, about an atomic war that wipes out all organic life in the Northern Hemisphere. A surviving Yankee submarine finds respite in Australia, which appears to be one of the few safe harbors on Earth. Where many films on this list veer into action or hard sci-fi territory, On the Beach opts for melodrama. Sure, there's still plenty of nihilism and social commentary, but on the whole, it feels much more like an existential soap opera than an explosion-heavy thriller. On the Beach pulls this off by featuring a powerful ensemble cast full of big-name talent. Adapted from the 1962 French film La Jetée, 12 Monkeys follows James Cole, a convict from the year 2035 sent through time to find a solution to the world's dark fate. In 1996, a deadly virus of unknown origin eradicated almost all life on Earth, forcing those who survived underground. The plan is to send Cole back to the day of the outbreak to learn how it all went down. But when he's accidentally transported too far back, his warnings of the end of days land him in a mental hospital. Boasting evocative production design and expectation-subverting performances from its two male leads, 12 Monkeys is a frantic, doom-filled ride with both style and substance. A Boy and His Dog takes place in the barren, irradiated wastes of 2024. Our hero is Vic, a morally suspect teenage boy who wanders from one bombed-out hole in the ground to the next in search of food and women. Along for the ride is Blood, a telepathic dog full of wry commentary.
Charity is a thing of the past.
This film is bleak, perverse, and offbeat, aka the holy trinity of 1970s apocalyptic science fiction. If you shook your fists at those who held super-spreader house parties during the COVID-19 pandemic, boy, have we got a film for you.
A top-shelf product of Roger Corman and Vincent Price's yen for Edgar Allan Poe adaptations, The Masque of the Red Death follows Prince Prospero, a hedonistic Satanist who is resolved to lock himself and his party guests in his enormous castle to stave off the terrible plague known as the Red Death.
Full of cruelty, scene-chewing, and gorgeous production design realized in jaw-dropping Technicolor, The Masque of the Red Death is a lavish visual feast of gothic delights that overcomes its budgetary limitations to deliver one of the most striking products of Corman's career. When animal rights activists unwittingly release a rabies-like virus onto the British public, the country is catapulted back to the Dark Ages. 4 weeks later, a man named Jim wakes up from a coma and surveys the wreckage of what used to be London. Rescued by a group of survivors, Jim finds that infected humans now stalk the streets, transformed into frothing homicidal maniacs. Infusing the zombie genre with kinetic new life, 28 Days Later proved the zombie genre still had life in it yet. In the aftermath of a top-secret experiment designed to create a global energy source, a scientist named Zach Hobson awakens to find that he is the last person alive on Earth. Or so he thinks. Soon Hobson happens upon two other survivors. As the trio discovers the common cause behind their survival, their emerging love triangle takes a backseat to Hobson's revelation that the full extent of the experiment's pernicious effects have yet to reveal themselves. Overwhelmingly cryptic and appropriately lonely, The Quiet Earth is a gorgeously photographed, low-budget gem grounded by three soul-wrenching lead performances. Boasting an incredible ensemble cast and an unsettling degree of plausibility, Contagion details the arrival and fallout of an airborne viral pandemic. This film's procedural plot makes the spread that much more compelling and terrifying. We follow the illness as it takes root, spawns conspiracy theories, and destabilizes society. Contagion makes particularly major use of Soderbergh's talent for depicting catastrophes and hypercompetence in equal measure. This film was a nerve-wracking watch in 2011 and has only become more uncanny and unsettling in the wake of the eerily similar COVID-19 pandemic. This iconic film may not initially read as apocalyptic fiction, but brace yourself for a 60-year-old spoiler. When the plot's larger context is ultimately revealed, its qualification as end-of-day cinema becomes painfully, ironically obvious. This film follows George Taylor, an astronaut stranded on a strange planet dominated by sentient ape-like creatures who use human captives for sport and scientific experiments.
Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
Still one of the bleakest films to come out of Hollywood, Planet of the Apes features a grounded performance by Roddy McDowall as the benevolent chimp Dr. Cornelius, and closes with one of the most infamous final shots in all of cinema. When Curtis begins to experience terrifying hallucinations, he seeks medical help and counseling. While Curtis's work and family suffer in the wake of his violent outbursts and horrifying visions of environmental catastrophe, he can't shake the feeling that something truly terrible is on the horizon. Are these dreams a genuine premonition of an incoming apocalypse? Or are they actually the onset of the inherited schizophrenia he's feared his whole life? A genuinely gripping portrait of the erosive effects of undiagnosed mental illness, Take Shelter is a gripping, anxiety-riddled viewing experience grounded by a gut-wrenching lead performance from Michael Shannon. Just as Harry is preparing to go on his first date with his dream girl, he accidentally receives a chilling tip-off that nuclear missiles are going to destroy Los Angeles in less than an hour. While Harry initially laughs off the information as a cruel joke or the ravings of a madman, he soon learns that the threat is very real and very imminent. Balancing endearingly unrelenting romantic idealism with an undeniable sense of hopelessness, this tangerine dream-scored neon-lit terror trip is a love story for the end times. This genre-defying feature debut follows Byung-gu, an unemployed conspiracy nut who has convinced himself that his former employer is an evil alien who intends to take over the planet. As such, Byung-gu abducts his boss and tortures him in a subterranean dungeon. As his paranoia spreads and his alien torture operation grows larger and larger, the resultant chaos grows ever more intense. Genre-defying and delightfully ridiculous. There is no film quite like Save the Green Planet, and for that fact alone, it's well worth seeking out. Directed by the Australian auteur Peter Weir, The Last Wave follows David Burton, a taxation lawyer who is hired to act as the defense in a murder case involving the death of an Aboriginal man during a freak rainstorm. When Burton begins to experience bizarre, watery dreams, he starts to agree with the accused. The strange weather patterns are a sign of an incoming apocalypse. Ambiguous and lyrical, The Last Wave is steeped in otherworldly strangeness as reality refuses to sit still. History may remember Saul Bass for his graphic design, but fans of apocalyptic fiction know his first and only directorial effort stands toe-to-toe with the kinetic typography of Psycho. A pair of scientific researchers in the Arizona desert find themselves held captive by the objects of their study, a colony of ants who have begun acting strangely in the wake of an unprecedented cosmic event. As the global implications of their ant-imposed lockdown take hold, driving the pair to nihilism and madness, humankind reveals itself to be an outmatched and overconfident species. Misanthropic and enormous in its scale, Phase 4 takes the creature feature formula and endows it with a desperate sense of fatalism. When a pair of employees at a medical supply warehouse accidentally unleash a deadly gas, the malignant vapors begin to raise the dead. What's more, the warehouse neighbors are a cemetery and a crematorium. In short, this is a recipe for disaster. As the dead wrench themselves back into the land of the living, they only have one thing on their minds. One of the most confident directorial debuts in horror history, The Return of the Living Dead is a rare breed. A horror comedy that truly delivers on the horror, both in the gore department and in confronting the existential probability that mankind is going to pratfall into its own destruction. A seance unleashes a horrifying glimpse of a long-dead priest and seemingly kills the woman who experiences the vision. While other occult-leaning women attempt to warn the powers that be of the bad vibes, the seer herself, who is very much alive, is rescued from her grave by a passing journalist. Together, the pair digs deeper into the vision, uncovering an imminent prophecy of undead invasion. Arguably one of the gnarliest offerings from Italian gore master Lucio Fulci, City of the Living Dead boasts unparalleled style and a refusal to dial down any of its apocalyptic spectacle. The final product is a miraculous and foreboding piece of filmmaking. Based on Michael Crichton's 1969 novel, The Andromeda Strain begins with a mysterious catastrophe. The residents of a rural New Mexico town all die after the crash landing of a satellite. The only survivors are an alcoholic man and a screaming infant. Suspecting the satellite may have brought a vicious alien organism into Earth's atmosphere, a group of scientists conduct an investigation in a top-secret lab armed to self-destruct if any infectious agent threatens to escape. Featuring science fiction harder than a diamond, with a procedural bent that will satisfy those with a love of 1970s conspiracy thrillers, The Andromeda Strain is the cruel pinnacle of the killer virus subgenre. Few end-of-days scenarios can contend with the literally earth-shattering catastrophe that befell our planet roughly 66 million years ago. Directed by Don Bluth, the former Disney artist who dominated children's feature animation during the 1980s, The Land Before Time tells of a group of young dinosaurs who are separated from their families during unprecedented environmental shifts. As they journey through the wasteland, the group is hounded by predators and a planet keen to snuff out their young lives. As dire, ominous, and distressing as any of the adult films on this list, The Land Before Time is a masterful story of perseverance, devastation, and the difficult necessity of accepting loss. Even though it's supposed to be the happiest day of her life, Justine is absolutely miserable throughout her wedding. She's doing her best, but her severe depression shows through the cracks, much to the embarrassment of her controlling sister, Claire. Meanwhile, an immense blue planet, Melancholia, is on a collision course with Earth. As the gargantuan celestial object bears down on our planet, Justine finds elation and peace in the promise of imminent destruction. Claire, on the other hand, descends further and further into anxiety and panic as her helplessness gets the better of her. Weaponizing cataclysmic destruction as a metaphor for all-consuming depressive episodes, Melancholia is a masterful, engulfing, necessarily draining watch. The year is 2027. And humanity has become sterile. As extinction looms, the planet's populace descends into martial law and total fury. We follow Theo, a former activist who is recruited by his anti-authority ex-wife to shepherd a very special woman to sanctuary. No human baby has been born in nearly 20 years, and yet somehow this woman is pregnant. With a startlingly believable vision of dystopia grounded in impeccably detailed production design and unforgettable cinematography, Children of Men isn't just one of the best pieces of apocalyptic fiction, but one of the greatest sci-fi films of the 21st century. Aliens have invaded Earth, and not as little green men, but as microscopic gelatinous spores capable of imitating and assimilating into the populace of prospective victims. Our hero is Matthew Bennell, a lab scientist who begins to grow wise to the extraterrestrial conspiracy as the signs of subversive takeover peek through the cracks. The question is, will he be able to alert the powers that be before it's too late? Who can he confide in when the enemy looks like a carbon copy of the people he trusts? For our money, it's the fourth entry in the Mad Max franchise that takes the cake. Or more accurately, the can of beans, or the barrel of gasoline. In all honesty, there's probably no cake to be found in this apocalypse, but Mad Max Fury Road is a cut above its predecessors. A feature-length car chase led by a rebellious imperator attempting to shepherd a warlord's brides to a safe haven, this film is a kinetic rock opera of dust clouds, skull-embedded wheels, and dogged perseverance. A modern classic with a wasteland we are keen to revisit time and time again, Mad Max Fury Road is the shiny, chromatic star of modern apocalyptic cinema.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
For reasons unknown, though radiation from a disintegrating space probe may be to blame, the dead are rising from their graves. A group of survivors fleeing the rotting hordes find themselves under one roof, where they're forced to steady their fragile nerves and work together to keep the flesh-hungry ghouls at bay. A groundbreaking, precedent-setting contribution to the apocalyptic genre, Night of the Living Dead set the stage for a litany of zombie films keenly interested in the human response to the end of days. Even more than 50 years past its initial release, Night of the Living Dead refuses to show its age. The stir-crazy residents of an Antarctic research station find themselves in a Lovecraftian nightmare when the dog they rescued explodes into a fleshy mass of spider legs and bullwhip tentacles. This high-stakes murder mystery is less of a whodunit than a who is it, which unfolds as the men are preyed upon by an intergalactic creature capable of imitating organic life. The gem in the crown of John Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy, which also contains the exceptional Prince of Darkness and In the Mouth of Madness, The Thing is a dread-drenched epic. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but with miscommunication and politicians fighting in the war room. However, there is also a bang for good measure. Simultaneously, one of the scariest and funniest films ever made, Stanley Kubrick's satirical masterpiece focuses on a gaggle of politicians, generals, and diplomats attempting to thwart an unintended nuclear holocaust instigated by an American general maddened by conspiracy theories. Horrifyingly plausible and undeniably hilarious, Dr. Strangelove is a classic for a reason. A guide, known as a Stalker in the film, shepherds two curious men through a bizarre area known as the Zone. Mysterious and forbidden, the Zone is a physics-defying land at the epicenter of an unspeakable extraterrestrial tragedy. In the core of the Zone lies their destination, the Room, a mystical space that seems to grant the deepest, darkest wishes of all who enter it. Directed by the great Soviet filmmaker Andrei Tarkovsky, Stalker is an evasive yet evocative take on science fiction's deepest questions.